Billionaire tech mogul Alexander Chen had built an empire from code and ambition, but his heart remained locked away behind encrypted walls. When humble office cleaner Sofia Martinez discovered a stack of handwritten love letters hidden in his desk drawer, she never imagined they were written for the girl she used to be. Could love rewrite their story, or would the truth destroy them both? Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. The rain hammered against the floor-to-ceiling windows of Chen Industries' 42nd floor as Alexander Chen stared out into the Seattle night. At 38, he commanded a technology empire worth $12 billion, his software powering half the world's smartphones. Yet tonight, like every night for the past 15 years, he felt hollow. The office towers stretched endlessly below him, their lights flickering like dying stars. Somewhere in that maze of glass and steel lived 8 million people, but Alexander had never felt more alone. His reflection stared back from the rain-streaked window, sharp cheekbones inherited from his Chinese father, piercing blue eyes from his Irish mother, and an expression that had forgotten how to smile. "Mr. Chen, the board meeting ran longer than expected," his assistant Marcus said from the doorway, adjusting his wire-rimmed glasses. "The quarterly projections are on your desk, and don't forget the charity auction tomorrow night. Your mother called 3 times about it." Alexander's jaw tightened. Another evening of forced conversations with Seattle's elite. Another parade of ambitious women who saw dollar signs instead of a man. "Tell her I'll consider it." "Sir, with respect, you said that about the last 4 events. She's threatening to show up at your penthouse if you don't attend." The thought of his mother's dramatic intervention made Alexander's temples throb. Victoria Chen had never accepted that her son preferred solitude to socializing, creation to conquest. "Fine. I'll make an appearance." After Marcus left, Alexander loosened his silk tie and rolled up the sleeves of his custom shirt. The building would be empty soon. Just him and the cleaning crew who worked like ghosts in the night. He preferred it that way. In the silence, he could think, could code, could pretend the weight of expectations didn't crush his chest with every breath. His private elevator descended to the parking garage, where his Tesla waited like a sleek predator. But instead of heading home to his empty penthouse, Alexander found himself driving through the city streets, past the coffee shops and bookstores where normal people lived normal lives. He envied them their simplicity, their genuine connections, their ability to love without calculating the cost. At a red light, he noticed a young woman walking alone, her uniform marking her as part of the night shift workforce that kept the city running while everyone else slept. Something about her posture, proud despite obvious exhaustion, reminded him of someone he'd lost long ago. The light turned green, and she disappeared into the crowd, another ghost in his carefully constructed world. Back at Chen Industries, Alexander's keycard granted him access to floors most employees never saw. He walked through the executive level, past conference rooms where million-dollar deals were struck and dreams were bought and sold. His corner office occupied a space larger than most apartments, its minimalist design reflecting a mind that valued function over sentiment. Almost without thinking, he opened the bottom drawer of his antique mahogany desk, the one piece of furniture he'd refused to replace when he'd renovated. Hidden beneath files and business cards lay a small wooden box, worn smooth by countless secret touches. Inside, wrapped in faded blue ribbon, were 17 handwritten letters. Alexander's hands trembled as he lifted them out. 15 years old, written on cream-colored stationery with a fountain pen his grandfather had given him. Love letters to a girl who had vanished from his life like morning mist, leaving behind only memories and the ache of unfinished sentences. He unfolded the first letter, his younger self's handwriting bold and hopeful across the page. "My dearest Sophia," it began, and his heart clenched as it did every time he read those words. "I dreamed of you again last night. We were in Mrs. Patterson's English class, and you were arguing with Tommy Richardson about Shakespeare again. You get this fire in your eyes when you're passionate about something, like the whole world could burn down and you wouldn't notice, because you're so focused on what matters to you." The letters chronicled a love that had bloomed in the halls of Lincoln High School, where Alexander Chen had been the quiet genius with thick glasses and second-hand clothes, and Sofia Martinez had been the bright star who made him believe in magic. She'd been beautiful, yes, but more than that, she'd been real. While other kids chased popularity and parties, Sofia had spent her afternoons tutoring struggling students and her weekends volunteering at the animal shelter. Alexander closed his eyes, remembering the way she'd laugh at his terrible jokes, how she defended him when the popular kids mocked his accent or his worn sneakers. They'd been inseparable for 2 perfect years, planning a future that seemed as certain as sunrise. Then her father had lost his job, her family had moved away overnight, and Alexander had been left with nothing but a forwarding address that led nowhere and letters he'd never had the courage to send. "Mr. Chen?" The voice startled him so badly that he nearly dropped the letters. Standing in his doorway was a woman in the blue uniform of Sterling Cleaning Services, her cart of supplies beside her. She was Latina, probably in her early 30s, with dark hair pulled back in a practical ponytail and intelligent brown eyes that seemed to see everything. "I'm sorry," she said, her voice carrying a slight accent that made his chest tighten with familiar longing. "I didn't know anyone was still here. I can come back later." Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. "No, it's fine," Alexander said, quickly sliding the letters back into their box. "I was just finishing up some work. Please, don't let me stop you." The woman hesitated, clearly uncomfortable with cleaning around the CEO. Alexander had never paid much attention to the cleaning staff before. They were part of the invisible infrastructure that kept his world running smoothly. But something about this woman's presence made him hyper-aware of every detail. She moved with quiet efficiency, dusting surfaces with practiced grace. Her uniform was clean but clearly well worn, and she wore no jewelry except for a small silver cross that caught the light as she worked. When she reached for a high shelf, Alexander noticed the careful way she stretched, as if her back ached from long hours of labor. "I'm Alexander," he said suddenly, surprising himself. She looked up from polishing his conference table, her expression cautious but polite. "Sofia Martinez. I clean this floor Monday through Friday." The name hit him like a physical blow. Sofia. It couldn't be. Could it? He studied her face more carefully, searching for traces of the girl he'd loved. The bone structure was similar, the shape of her eyes, but 15 years had changed them both. This Sofia was thinner, worry lines etched around her eyes, her skin bearing the marks of a life lived without luxury. "Sofia," he repeated, testing the name on his tongue. "That's a beautiful name." A small smile crossed her lips, transforming her tired features. "Thank you. My grandmother chose it. She said it meant wisdom, and she hoped I'd be smarter than she was." Alexander's heart hammered against his ribs. His Sofia had told him the exact same story about her grandmother, about the meaning of her name. But this woman showed no sign of recognition, no spark of memory in her eyes when she looked at him. "Have we met before?" he asked carefully. Sofia shook her head, returning to her work. "No, sir. I've only been working this building for 6 months. Before that, I was at the medical center downtown." The conversation fell into stilted silence as Sofia finished cleaning his office. Alexander watched her every movement, cataloging similarities and differences. The way she tucked a strand of hair behind her ear was achingly familiar. But the calluses on her hands spoke of a hardship his Sofia had never known. When she reached his desk, Sofia's movements became more careful, more respectful of his personal space. "I'll just empty your trash and dust around your things," she said softly. As she leaned over to clean the desktop, the small wooden box caught her attention. Alexander's breath stopped as her fingers hesitated near it, not touching, but clearly curious. "It's just old papers," he said quickly, sliding the box away from her reach. Sofia nodded and continued her work, but Alexander caught the flash of something in her eyes. Hurt? Disappointment? It was gone too quickly to interpret. "Do you have family in Seattle?" he asked, desperate to keep her talking, to solve the mystery of her identity. "My daughter," Sofia said, her voice warming with genuine love. "Isabella. She's 12, in 7th grade at Roosevelt Middle School. A daughter." Alexander's chest tightened with an emotion he couldn't name. Of course she had built a life, found love, created a family. What had he expected? That she would remain frozen in time, waiting for letters he'd never sent? "And your husband?" The question slipped out before he could stop it. Sofia's movements stilled for a moment. "It's just Isabella and me. Her father." She trailed off, then straightened her shoulders with that familiar pride. "We manage fine on our own." The defiance in her voice reminded him so strongly of his teenage Sofia that Alexander had to grip the edge of his desk to steady himself. She'd always been fierce about her independence, never wanting to be seen as charity case despite her family's struggles. "I'm sure you do," he said gently. "Single parents are some of the strongest people I know." Sofia glanced at him with surprise, as if she hadn't expected understanding from a billionaire CEO. "Thank you. That's kind of you to say." She finished cleaning and gathered her supplies, preparing to leave. Alexander felt panic rising in his throat. He wasn't ready for her to go, wasn't ready to return to his empty office with its weight of unspoken words. "Sofia," he called, as she reached the door. She turned back, eyebrows raised in question. "Be careful going home. It's late, and the buses don't run as frequently after midnight." A ghost of a smile crossed her lips. "I appreciate the concern, Mr. Chen, but I've been taking care of myself for a long time." After she left, Alexander sat in his leather chair, staring at the wooden box that held his deepest secrets. Was it really her? The Sofia who had held his 17-year-old heart in her gentle hands? Or was he seeing what he wanted to see, projecting his lost love onto a stranger who happened to share her name? He opened the box again, pulling out a letter dated March 15th, his senior year. "I know your family is struggling," his younger self had written. "And I know your father's pride won't let him accept help from a kid like me. But I want you to know that when I make it big with my software company, when I have more money than either of us can imagine, I'm going to build something beautiful for you. A place where kids like us can learn and dream and become more than anyone expected. I'll call it the Sofia Martinez Center for Innovation, and everyone will know that the smartest, kindest, most beautiful girl in Lincoln High School inspired it all." Tears blurred his vision as he read his teenage promises, his naive certainty that love could conquer any obstacle. He had built his empire, accumulated more wealth than his 17-year-old self could have imagined, but he'd never built that center, never honored the girl who had believed in him when no one else would. Alexander pulled out his phone and searched for information about Sofia Martinez. There were thousands of them, but when he added Seattle and narrowed the search, he found her. A brief mention in a community newsletter about parent volunteers at Roosevelt Middle School. The photo was small and blurry, but it was definitely the woman who had just cleaned his office. According to the article, Sofia worked 2 jobs to support her daughter, cleaning offices at night and working at a local community center during the day. The community center ran after-school programs for underprivileged kids, providing tutoring and mentorship. It was exactly the kind of work his Sofia would have chosen, exactly the way she would have channeled her natural compassion. Alexander's hands shook as he scrolled through more search results. A mention of Sofia Martinez receiving a community service award 5 years ago. Another article about her leading a fundraising drive for new computers at the community center. Each piece of information painted a picture of a woman who had never lost her generous heart, despite whatever hardships life had thrown at her. He found Isabella's school records next, his software company's connections giving him access to information others couldn't reach. Isabella Martinez, age 12, honor roll student, member of the chess club and debate team. Smart like her mother, with the same fierce determination Sofia had shown in high school. But it was the birth certificate that stopped Alexander's heart cold. Isabella Sofia Martinez, born September 14th, 15 years ago. 15 years. Alexander counted backward, his brilliant mind doing calculations he didn't want to complete. Isabella would have been conceived in December 15 years ago, just 2 months after Sofia's family had disappeared from Lincoln High School. 2 months after the last time Alexander had seen the girl he'd planned to marry. The wooden box slipped from his nerveless fingers, love letters scattering across the polished floor like fallen leaves. One landed face up, revealing words written in his teenage hand. "I love you, Sofia Martinez. I will love you until the stars burn out and the universe forgets how to dream." Alexander stared at the letter, at the scattered promises of a boy who had never imagined that the girl he loved might have been carrying his child when she vanished from his life. His hands trembled as he gathered the letters, his mind racing through possibilities and implications. Was Isabella his daughter? Had Sofia kept this secret for 12 years, raising their child alone while he built his empire in ignorance? The timeline fit, but coincidences happened every day. Yet something deep in his chest, some instinct older than logic, whispered that he already knew the truth. The city lights blurred beyond his windows as Alexander Chen, billionaire genius, master of code and commerce, sat surrounded by love letters to a girl who had become a woman he didn't recognize. A woman who cleaned his office 5 nights a week, close enough to touch but separated by 15 years of silence and a chasm of unspoken truth. Tomorrow, he would have to decide whether to let sleeping secrets lie or risk everything to discover if the love story he'd thought was over had actually just begun. I used to imagine teaching kids in neighborhoods like mine how to use art to tell their stories, Maya said, pausing in front of a mural that depicted the history of Seattle's immigrant communities. Not just pretty pictures, but real art that captures what it's like to grow up between 2 worlds, or to watch your parents work 3 jobs just to keep the lights on. Alexander stopped walking and turned to face her fully. What would you need to make that happen? The question caught Maya off guard. She was used to people nodding politely when she shared her dreams, offering encouraging but ultimately empty responses like, "That sounds nice," or "Maybe someday." Alexander's question demanded specifics, required her to think about her dream as something achievable, rather than just wishful thinking. Space, I guess. Art supplies. A way to reach the kids who need it most. Maya felt her excitement building as she spoke. And teachers who understand what it's like to grow up without resources, who can connect with kids who think art is just for rich people. How much space? What kind of supplies? How would you structure the program? For the next hour, as they wandered through the market, Maya found herself sketching out a business plan without realizing that's what she was doing. Alexander's questions were sharp and practical, pushing her to consider details she'd never thought through. How would transportation work for kids whose parents couldn't drive them across town? What about liability insurance? How would they measure success? By the time they sat down for lunch at a small Ethiopian restaurant tucked between a vintage bookstore and a record shop, Maya had outlined a comprehensive program that could serve hundreds of kids across Seattle. The realization hit her like a physical force. I could actually do this, she said, staring at the notes she'd scribbled on napkins. This could be real. Alexander smiled, the expression transforming his usually serious face. Of course it could. The question is, do you want it to be real? That night, Maya lay awake, staring at the ceiling of her tiny bedroom, her mind racing with possibilities. The $100,000 Alexander had given her was sitting in a new bank account, untouched while she decided what to do with it. Part of her wanted to use it practically, to pay off her mother's medical bills and help with Danny's college expenses. But another part, a part that had been dormant for years, was whispering about art studios and community programs and dreams that might not be as impossible as she'd always believed. The crisis came on a Thursday afternoon, 2.5 weeks after the coffee incident that had changed everything. Maya was working the lunch shift at the corner cafe when her phone rang with a call from Danny's high school guidance counselor. Her brother had been accepted to University of Washington, but there had been a mix-up with his financial aid package. Instead of the full scholarship they'd been counting on, he'd only received partial aid. The family would need to come up with an additional $15,000 for his first year, money they didn't have. Maya's hands shook as she hung up the phone. $15,000 might as well have been $15 million. Even with the money Alexander had given her, using it for Danny's education would mean giving up her dreams once again, returning to the safe, practical path she'd been walking for years. She called in sick for her evening shift and spent the afternoon walking aimlessly through downtown Seattle, her mind churning with impossible choices. By the time she found herself standing outside the Reed Technologies building, the sun was setting and the evening rush was beginning. She stared up at the gleaming tower, knowing Alexander was somewhere high above, probably in meetings with people who dealt with $15,000 problems as easily as she dealt with coffee orders. Her phone buzzed with a text from Alexander. Thinking about you today. Everything okay? Before she could lose her nerve, Maya typed back. Can we talk? I'm outside your building. 20 minutes later, Alexander emerged from the elevator in the lobby, his tie loosened and his sleeves rolled up. He took one look at Maya's face and guided her to a quiet seating area near the windows. What happened? He asked, his voice gentle but concerned. Maya told him about Danny's scholarship situation, about the impossible choice between her brother's future and her own dreams. As she spoke, she watched Alexander's expression, looking for signs of impatience or judgment. Instead, she saw something that looked like understanding and, underneath that, anger. So the system is forcing you to choose between supporting your family and pursuing your own goals, Alexander said when she finished. Again. It's not the system's fault, Maya said automatically. It's just how things are. Families take care of each other. And who takes care of you, Maya? The question hit her like a slap. Maya opened her mouth to respond, then closed it again. When was the last time someone had asked who was looking out for her needs, her dreams, her future? I take care of myself, she said finally. Do you? Or do you just make sure everyone else is taken care of first and hope there's something left over for you? Alexander leaned forward, his eyes intense. Maya, what if I told you there was a third option? What if you didn't have to choose between Danny's education and your dreams? There isn't enough money for both. There is if you're willing to think bigger. Alexander pulled out his phone and opened a note-taking app. Tell me about your community art program again. But this time, tell me how it could become sustainable, how it could generate its own funding while serving the kids you want to help. Despite her emotional exhaustion, Maya found herself drawn into the conversation. Alexander's questions pushed her to think about her program not just as a charitable effort, but as a social enterprise that could create value while serving its mission. What if they charged sliding-scale fees for families who could afford to pay, subsidizing free spots for those who couldn't? What if they partnered with local businesses to create apprenticeship programs? What if they sold the art created in the program, with proceeds going back into scholarships and supplies? You're talking about starting a business, Maya said, the realization both thrilling and terrifying. I'm talking about starting a movement, Alexander corrected. A sustainable way to provide opportunities for kids who need them most, while creating a career for yourself that aligns with your values and talents. He showed her examples on his phone of similar programs in other cities, social enterprises that had grown from single locations to nationwide networks. The founders weren't billionaires or people with trust funds. They were teachers, social workers, artists who had seen a need and figured out how to meet it while building something lasting. But the startup costs, Maya said, her practical nature reasserting itself. Even with the money you gave me, it wouldn't be enough to launch something like this and help Danny. Alexander was quiet for a long moment, his fingers steepled in front of his face. When he spoke, his voice was carefully neutral. What if there was additional funding available? Not charity, but investment in a viable business with strong social impact potential. Maya's stomach clenched. You mean your money? I mean funding from someone who believes in the program and wants to see it succeed. Alexander, I can't keep taking money from you. People will think... She trailed off, not sure how to finish the sentence. They'll think what? That I'm smart enough to recognize a good investment when I see one? Alexander's voice carried a note of frustration. Maya, I've made my fortune by betting on people and ideas that others overlook. This isn't charity, it's business. Is it? Or are you trying to rescue me? The question hung in the air between them, loaded with implications neither of them had addressed directly. Maya saw something shift in Alexander's expression, a vulnerability she hadn't seen before. Maybe I am, he admitted quietly, but not in the way you think. Maya, for the past 5 years, every business decision I've made has been about maximizing profit and shareholder value. I've been successful by every measurable standard, but I've lost sight of why any of it matters. He looked out the window at the city beyond. Meeting you reminded me that business can be about more than just making money. It can be about creating opportunities, solving problems, making the world a little bit better. Maya felt tears prick at her eyes. So I'm your midlife crisis project? Alexander turned back to her, his eyes serious. You're the person who reminded me what I wanted to be when I grew up, before I got caught up in what I thought I was supposed to be. He reached across the small table and took her hand. But this offer isn't about what I need, Maya. It's about what you deserve. You deserve to have both, your brother's education and your own dreams. You deserve a partner who can help make both possible. The word partner sent a jolt through Maya's system. Over the past 2 weeks, their relationship had existed in a strange space between friendship and something more. There had been moments of connection, touches that lingered a beat too long, conversations that felt intimate in ways that had nothing to do with romance. But neither of them had acknowledged what was growing between them. Is that what this is? Maya asked, her voice barely above a whisper. A partnership? Alexander's thumb traced across her knuckles. I don't know what this is yet. I just know that I've never met anyone who challenges me to be better the way you do. And I've never wanted to build something with someone the way I want to build something with you. Maya looked down at their joined hands, her mind racing. 3 weeks ago, her biggest decision had been whether to buy generic or name-brand coffee for the cafe. Now she was being offered a chance to start a business, pursue her dreams, and explore a relationship with a man who saw possibilities in her that she'd never seen in herself. I'm scared, she admitted. Good, Alexander said, squeezing her hand. If you weren't scared, it wouldn't be worth doing. Maya took a deep breath, feeling something shift inside her chest. For years, she'd made decisions based on fear, choosing safety over possibility, security over growth. But sitting in the lobby of Reed Technologies, with the city lights beginning to twinkle outside, and Alexander's hand warm in hers, she felt something she'd almost forgotten. She felt brave. If we do this, Maya said slowly, if we really do this, I want to do it right. Real business plan, clear expectations, legal contracts. I won't be anyone's charity case, not even yours. Alexander's smile was brilliant. I wouldn't have it any other way. And I want to start small. 1 location, maybe 20 kids to begin with. Prove the concept before we think about expanding. Smart approach. Maya pulled her hand free and sat back in her chair, her business mind fully engaged now. I'll need 6 months to develop the curriculum and find the right space. Danny's tuition is due in 8 weeks, so that has to be handled first. And I want to keep working at the cafe part-time, at least initially. I need to maintain some income independence. Alexander nodded, pulling out his phone to take notes. What about the name? Have you thought about what to call the program? Maya closed her eyes, thinking about the kids she wanted to serve, the stories they would tell through their art, the dreams that might flourish in the right environment. When she opened her eyes, she was smiling. Canvas and community, she said, because art is just the beginning. What we're really building is connection. Alexander typed the name into his phone, then looked up at her with an expression of such pride and affection that Maya felt her cheeks warm. Maya Chen, founder and director of Canvas and Community, he said, testing how the words sounded. I like it. As they left the building together, walking out into the Seattle evening with plans to meet the next day to discuss details, Maya felt like she was stepping into a completely different life. Not just because of the money or the business opportunity, but because of the way Alexander looked at her when she talked about her dreams. Like they weren't just possible, but inevitable. For the first time in years, Maya Chen was betting on herself. And win or lose, she was finally playing a game worth playing. 6 months later, Maya stood in the doorway of what had once been an abandoned auto repair shop in the International District, watching 12-year-old Sofia Ramirez put the finishing touches on a mural that took Maya's breath away. The painting depicted a young girl walking across a bridge made of paintbrushes, with her grandmother's face emerging from the clouds above and the Seattle skyline stretching out below. It was raw, honest, and more powerful than anything Maya had seen in galleries that charged $50 admission. Miss Maya, is it really going in the community center? Sofia asked, stepping back to examine her work with the critical eye of an artist twice her age. It's going wherever you want it to go, Maya replied, her voice thick with emotion. That's your story to tell and your decision to make. The transformation of the old repair shop into Canvas and Community had taken every ounce of energy, creativity, and determination Maya possessed. The space now hummed with life, divided into different zones for painting, sculpture, digital design, and what Maya called the story circle, where kids shared the experiences that inspired their art. Afternoon sunlight streamed through skylights that Alexander had insisted on installing, casting a warm glow over canvases covered in dreams, struggles, and hopes rendered in bold strokes of color. Maya moved through the space with the confidence of someone who had found her calling. 23 kids were enrolled in the program now, ranging in age from 8 to 16, each carrying stories that would break your heart and inspire your soul in the same breath. There was Marcus, whose paintings of urban gardens bloomed with the vegetables his family couldn't afford to buy. Lily created intricate collages from discarded materials she found in her apartment complex, turning trash into treasure with an eye for beauty that left Maya speechless. And then there was David, whose sculptures made from recycled electronics told the story of a generation caught between the digital world and the physical one. The program had exceeded every goal Maya had set during those initial planning sessions with Alexander. Not only were they serving more kids than originally planned, but the waiting list stretched 3 pages long. Local news outlets had featured Canvas and Community twice, and Maya had been invited to speak at conferences about social entrepreneurship and community development. The sliding scale payment system was working exactly as designed, with families who could afford full fees subsidizing scholarships for those who couldn't pay anything at all. But the real measure of success wasn't in the numbers or the media attention. It was in moments like this one, watching Sofia step back from her mural with the quiet satisfaction of someone who had found her voice and wasn't afraid to use it. "Maya, you need to see this." Alexander's voice came from behind her, carrying a note of excitement that had become familiar over the past months. Their relationship had evolved into something deeper and more complex than either of them had anticipated, blending business partnership with personal connection in ways that sometimes surprised them both. Maya turned to find Alexander holding his tablet, his eyes bright with the kind of enthusiasm he usually reserved for major business breakthroughs. "The Cascade Foundation wants to meet with us next week. They're interested in funding expansion to 5 more cities." Maya felt her stomach drop. The Cascade Foundation was one of the largest philanthropic organizations in the Pacific Northwest, with a budget that could transform Canvas and Community from a local program into a national movement. It was the kind of opportunity she would have dreamed about 6 months ago, the kind of validation that proved their work mattered on a scale beyond what they'd imagined. So why did the news make her feel like she was standing on the edge of a cliff? "That's incredible," Maya said, forcing enthusiasm into her voice. "How did they hear about us?" "The usual channels, media coverage, word of mouth, probably some recommendations from other organizations we've partnered with." Alexander's smile faded as he studied her expression. "You don't look happy about this." Maya glanced around the studio, taking in the controlled chaos of creativity that surrounded them. Kids worked in small groups, their conversations mixing English and Spanish, and sometimes languages she couldn't identify. The walls were covered with artwork that told the stories of their community, pieces that were beautiful not because they followed traditional rules, but because they came from authentic places of experience and emotion. "Can we talk outside?" Maya asked. They walked to the small courtyard behind the building, where Maya had created an outdoor workspace for sculpture and large-scale projects. The late afternoon air carried the sounds of the neighborhood around them, car horns and conversations, and the distant music from the taco truck that parked on the corner every day after 3 o'clock. "What's wrong?" Alexander asked, leaning against the brick wall. Over the months, he'd learned to read Maya's moods, to recognize when her silence meant she was processing something important, rather than just being quiet. "Nothing's wrong, exactly. It's just..." Maya struggled to find the words. "When we started this, the goal was to serve the kids in this neighborhood, to create something that met their specific needs. Expanding to 5 cities means bureaucracy, standardization, losing the personal touch that makes this work." Alexander nodded slowly. "You're worried about mission drift. I'm worried about becoming something we never intended to be. About losing sight of Sofia and Marcus and Lily while we're busy managing spreadsheets and donor reports." Maya picked up a piece of clay that one of the kids had left on a workbench, rolling it between her fingers. "You've seen what happens to small programs when they get big funding. They start serving the foundation's vision instead of the community's needs." "Not always," Alexander said gently. And the Cascade Foundation has a good reputation for supporting grassroots organizations without micromanaging them. But what if they don't? What if the price of their support is compromising everything we've built here? Alexander was quiet for a moment, his gaze focused on something in the distance. When he spoke, his voice carried a weight Maya hadn't heard before. Alexander barely slept that night. He stood on his penthouse balcony as dawn painted Seattle's skyline in shades of gold and rose, the love letters clutched in his trembling hands. 12 years. If Isabella was his daughter, he had missed 12 years of bedtime stories, first steps, scraped knees, and proud moments. The weight of that possibility crushed his chest like a physical force. By 7 a.m., he was back at Chen Industries, pacing his office like a caged wolf. He'd made a decision that terrified him more than any hostile takeover or failed product launch. He was going to find out the truth, whatever the cost. His first call was to Marcus. "I need you to clear my schedule for the next 2 weeks." "Sir, you have the Morrison Industries merger meeting this afternoon, and the charity auction tonight. Your mother will literally murder me if you don't show up." "Cancel everything," Alexander said firmly. "And Marcus? I need you to research the Roosevelt Middle School chess tournament schedule. Find out when their next competition is." Marcus paused, clearly confused. "Chess tournaments, sir?" "Just do it. And order flowers to be delivered to the Sterling Cleaning Services office. Something simple, not ostentatious. Include a note that says thank you for your hard work." After hanging up, Alexander opened his laptop and began typing with the focused intensity that had built his empire. But instead of code or business proposals, he was crafting something far more dangerous. A plan to discover if the woman who cleaned his office was the girl who had stolen his heart 15 years ago. Meanwhile, across the city in a cramped 2-bedroom apartment, Sofia Martinez was helping her daughter get ready for school. Isabella stood before the bathroom mirror, carefully braiding her long dark hair, her movements precise and methodical. "Mom, you look tired," Isabella said, catching Sofia's reflection in the mirror. "Did you work late again last night?" Sofia forced a smile, adjusting the collar of Isabella's school uniform. "Just the usual, mija. Nothing to worry about." But Isabella was too perceptive for her own good, inheriting not just Sofia's intelligence, but also her ability to read people's emotions. "You've been different lately, ever since you started cleaning that new building. Did something happen?" Sofia's hands stilled on her daughter's shoulders. How could she explain the strange encounter with Alexander Chen? The way his intense blue eyes had made her feel exposed and vulnerable. How could she describe the odd sensation that she'd met him before, somewhere in the hazy landscape of half-remembered dreams? "It's nothing, baby. Just adjusting to a new routine." Isabella turned to face her mother, and Sofia's breath caught as it always did when she saw her daughter's eyes. They were the exact shade of blue as Alexander Chen's, a color so rare and striking that strangers often commented on them. For 12 years, Sofia had told herself it was a coincidence that plenty of people had blue eyes. But last night, staring into Alexander's face, she'd felt the walls of denial beginning to crumble. "Mom!" Isabella's voice brought her back to the present. "You're doing that thing where you stare at me like you're trying to solve a puzzle." Sofia laughed, the sound slightly hollow. "You're my favorite puzzle, Mia. The most beautiful one I'll ever solve." After dropping Isabella at school, Sofia headed to her day job at the Riverside Community Center. The building was old and underfunded, its walls painted in cheerful colors that couldn't quite hide the wear and tear of decades of use. But it was a place of hope, where kids from tough neighborhoods came to dream of better futures. "Sofia, thank God you're here," called Maria Santos, the center's director, as Sofia walked through the front doors. "The new computers are being delivered today, and I have no idea how to set them up." Sofia smiled, genuinely this time. This was her element, helping kids access the tools they needed to succeed. "Don't worry, Maria. I learned a few things about computers in high school. I'll figure it out." As she worked to unpack and configure the donated machines, Sofia's mind drifted back to those high school days. She'd been the girl who tutored struggling students, who believed education could lift anyone out of poverty. And there had been a boy, quiet and brilliant, who'd helped her see that technology could be magic in the right hands. Alexander Chen. Even thinking his name sent shivers through her body. She'd recognized him last night, of course she had. Time might have chiseled his features into aristocratic sharpness, and success might have given him an aura of untouchable power. But those eyes were the same ones that had looked at her with teenage devotion 15 years ago. The same eyes Isabella had inherited. Sofia's hands trembled as she connected cables and powered up monitors. She'd spent over a decade building walls around that truth, protecting herself and her daughter from the complications that acknowledgement would bring. Alexander Chen was one of the richest men in America now. What would he want with a former girlfriend who cleaned offices and raised his child in a 2-bedroom apartment? "Miss Sofia, this is so cool," called out 7-year-old Miguel, one of the after-school program kids, as the computers came to life. "Can you teach me how to make games like that rich guy on TV?" "What rich guy?" Sofia asked, though her heart was already sinking. "Alexander Chen. My cousin says he made all the apps on his phone. Says he's like a real-life superhero, but with money instead of powers." Sofia managed a weak smile. "Maybe we should start with learning to type first, Miguel." But the boy's innocent words echoed in her head all day. Alexander had achieved everything he dreamed of in high school and more. He lived in a world of private jets and board meetings, of charity galas and society photographs. What place could there be in that world for a cleaning lady and her 12-year-old daughter? That evening, as Sofia prepared for another night shift, she found a bouquet of simple white roses waiting outside her apartment door. The card read, "Thank you for your hard work. AC." Her hands shook as she held the card. Alexander Chen. Even his initials sent her back to high school, to love notes passed in hallways and dreams shared under star-filled skies. He remembered her. That much was clear. But what did he want? And more importantly, what was she prepared to risk to find out? At Chen Industries that night, Alexander waited in his office with the nervous energy of a teenager asking someone to prom. He'd rehearsed a dozen conversations, planned out subtle ways to learn more about Sofia's past without revealing his own suspicions. But when she appeared in his doorway at her usual time, all his careful planning evaporated. "Thank you for the flowers," Sofia said quietly, her cleaning cart positioned between them like a protective barrier. "They were beautiful." "You're welcome. I thought you might appreciate something nice after working so hard." Sofia began her cleaning routine, but Alexander could sense the tension in her movements. The careful way she avoided looking directly at him. The air between them crackled with unspoken questions and half-buried memories. "Sofia," he said finally, unable to bear the pretense any longer, "can I ask you something personal?" Her hands stilled on the surface she was polishing. "I suppose. Have you always lived in Seattle?" A shadow crossed her face. "Most of my life. I moved here when Isabella was born." "Where did you live before that?" Sofia's knuckles whitened as she gripped her cleaning cloth. "A small town outside Portland." "Lincoln." Alexander's heart stopped. Lincoln. The same small town where they'd met, where they'd fallen in love, where his world had ended when her family disappeared overnight. "Lincoln's a nice place," he managed to say, his voice carefully neutral. "Small but friendly. I spent some time there myself as a teenager." Sofia looked up sharply, and for a moment their eyes met across the space between them. Alexander saw recognition there. Quickly suppressed, but undeniably real. She knew exactly who he was. "It was a long time ago," Sofia said carefully. "I was very young when I left." "Sometimes the things that happen when we're young shape everything that comes after," Alexander said softly. "Sometimes we carry them with us forever, even when we think we've moved on." Sofia set down her cleaning supplies and faced him fully for the first time since entering his office. "Mr. Chen, why are you really asking me these questions?" The moment stretched between them, heavy with 15 years of silence and secrets. Alexander could feel the weight of the love letters in his desk drawer, the DNA test he'd already arranged, the private investigator's report that would arrive tomorrow with confirmation of what his heart already knew. "Because I think we knew each other once," he said finally. "A long time ago, when we were different people living different lives." Sofia's composure cracked. and he saw the girl he'd loved hiding behind the woman's careful mask. "Alexander," she whispered, and his name on her lips was like coming home after years of wandering in the wilderness. "Hello, Sofia," he said gently. "I've missed you." Tears spilled down her cheeks as 15 years of buried emotion came flooding back. "I thought you'd forgotten me." "I thought when I left without saying goodbye, that was the end of our story." Alexander stood and moved toward her, slowly, as if approaching a frightened deer. "I could never forget you. I wrote you letters, dozens of them. I kept writing long after I stopped believing you'd ever read them." "Letters?" Sofia's voice was barely a whisper. Alexander opened his desk drawer and pulled out the wooden box. Sofia's eyes widened as she recognized it. The same box where he'd kept her picture and the small gift she'd given him in high school. "I wrote to you every week for 2 years after you left," he said, opening the box to reveal the stack of cream-colored envelopes. "I poured my heart into these pages, told you about college, about my dreams, about how much I loved you and missed you. I kept writing even when the letters came back undelivered." Sofia stared at the letters as if they were sacred relics. "You kept them all these years?" "They were all I had left of us. All I had left of the person I was when I was with you." Slowly, reverently, Sofia reached out and touched the top envelope. Her name was written across it in Alexander's younger handwriting, and seeing it made her breath catch. "Alexander, there's something I need to tell you," she began, but he gently shook his head. "I know about Isabella," he said softly. "I figured it out last night. The timing. Her age. Those eyes that are exactly like mine. She's our daughter, isn't she?" Sofia's legs gave out, and she sank into the chair across from his desk. The secret she'd carried for 12 years, the weight that had pressed on her chest every day since Isabella's birth, was finally in the open. "I tried to find you when I discovered I was pregnant," she whispered. "But your family had moved too, and I was 17, and scared, and alone. I thought maybe it was better that way. You had such big dreams, such a bright future ahead of you. I didn't want to hold you back." Alexander knelt beside her chair, taking her hands in his. "Hold me back? Sofia, you were my future. Everything I built, every success I achieved, it was all empty because you weren't there to share it with me." "But look at what you became," Sofia protested. "Look at this empire you built. You're one of the most successful men in the world. If you'd been tied down with a teenage pregnancy, with someone from the wrong side of town, I would have been the luckiest man alive," Alexander interrupted fiercely. "Do you know what I've done with all this success, Sofia? I've spent 15 years in a prison of my own making, surrounded by people who only see my bank account, living in a penthouse that echoes with loneliness. I have everything money can buy, and nothing that actually matters." Sofia looked up into his eyes, seeing the pain and longing she'd tried so hard to forget. "Alexander, I clean your office 5 nights a week. I live in a 2-bedroom apartment and shop at thrift stores. Isabella and we're not part of your world." "You are my world," he said simply. "You always were. Everything else is just noise." They sat in silence for a moment, the weight of revelation settling between them. Outside, Seattle glittered in the darkness, 8 million people living their lives, while 2 former lovers rediscovered a connection that had never truly been broken. "What happens now?" Sofia asked finally. Alexander squeezed her hands gently. "Now I meet my daughter. Now I try to earn back the 15 years I lost. Now I prove to both of you that love is more powerful than pride or fear, or the stupid mistakes we made when we were too young to know better." Sofia wiped her tears with the back of her hand, a gesture so familiar it made Alexander's heart ache. "She's an amazing girl, Alexander. Smart and funny and kind. She's going to have so many questions." "Then we'll answer them together," Alexander said. "All of them, honestly. No more secrets, no more missed chances. We owe her that much, we owe ourselves that much." As Sofia gathered her cleaning supplies to leave, Alexander carefully placed the love letters back in their box. Tomorrow he would share them with his daughter, would show her the words her teenage father had written to the mother he'd never stopped loving. "Sofia," he called as she reached the door. She turned back, and in her eyes, he saw not just the successful woman she'd become, but traces of the hopeful girl who had once believed in forever. "This time, I'm not letting you disappear," he said. "This time, we're going to get our happy ending." Sofia smiled, the first truly radiant smile he'd seen from her since they'd reunited. "I'd like that," she whispered. "I'd like that very much." The next morning, Alexander stood outside Roosevelt Middle School, his palms sweating like a nervous teenager. He'd faced boardrooms full of hostile investors, delivered presentations to thousands, built a company from nothing but code and determination. Yet the prospect of meeting his 12-year-old daughter terrified him more than anything he'd ever encountered. Sofia emerged from the school building, Isabella at her side. Alexander's breath caught as he saw his daughter up close for the first time. She was beautiful, with Sofia's delicate features and his striking blue eyes. But more than that, she carried herself with a quiet confidence that reminded him of both her parents. "Isabella, there's someone I'd like you to meet," Sofia said gently, her voice steady despite the tremor Alexander could hear beneath the surface. Isabella looked up at the tall man in the expensive suit, her intelligent eyes taking in every detail. "You're Alexander Chen," she said matter-of-factly. "I saw your picture in Time magazine last month. You created the operating system that runs on like half the phones in the world." Alexander smiled, surprised by her directness. "That's right, though I had a lot of help from very smart people." "Mom says you knew each other in high school," Isabella continued, studying his face with unnerving intensity. "She also says you have something important to tell me." Alexander glanced at Sofia, who nodded encouragingly. They'd talked on the phone until 3 in the morning, planning how to break the news, how to help Isabella understand the complicated truth of her parentage. "Would you like to get lunch somewhere we can talk?" Alexander asked. "I know a place that makes amazing burgers." Isabella's eyes lit up with interest, but she looked to her mother for permission. "Can we, Mom?" "Of course, mija," Sofia said, though Alexander could see the anxiety in her eyes. This was uncharted territory for all of them. They walked to a small diner 6 blocks from the school, the kind of place with red vinyl booths and a jukebox in the corner. Isabella slid into one side of the booth while Alexander and Sofia sat across from her, united in their nervousness. "So," Isabella said, picking up a French fry and pointing it at Alexander like a tiny sword. "What's this big important thing you need to tell me? Are you and Mom getting married or something?" Alexander nearly choked on his water. "It's actually more complicated than that, Isabella. Can I call you Bella?" "Nobody calls me Bella except Mom when she's being mushy," Isabella said with a grin that was pure Sofia. "But I guess you can if you want." Alexander took a deep breath, feeling the weight of 15 years pressing down on his chest. "Bella, when your mom and I were in high school, we cared about each other very much. We were planning a future together, but then circumstances separated us before we could make those plans happen." Isabella nodded, her young face serious as she processed this information. "And then Mom had me." "Yes," Alexander said softly. "And we lost touch with each other for a very long time. But recently when I met your mom again, I realized something important." Isabella's French fry paused halfway to her mouth. "What did you realize?" Alexander looked into his daughter's eyes, those familiar blue eyes that were like looking into a mirror from his past. "I realized that you're my daughter, Bella. I'm your father." The diner seemed to go silent around them, though the conversations and clatter of dishes continued unchanged. Isabella set down her French fry and stared at Alexander with an expression that cycled through shock, confusion, and something that might have been hope. "You're my dad?" she whispered. "Yes," Alexander said, his voice thick with emotion. "I'm your dad. And I'm sorry it took so long for us to find each other." Isabella looked back and forth between her parents, her brilliant mind clearly working through the implications. "So when other kids ask me why I didn't have a father, it wasn't because he didn't want me. It was because he didn't know about me." Sofia reached across the table and took her daughter's hand. "That's exactly right, Meja. Your father never knew you existed, and I thought it was better that way. I was wrong about that, and I'm sorry." "Are you rich?" Isabella asked Alexander suddenly, with the blunt curiosity of a 12-year-old. Alexander laughed despite the emotional weight of the moment. "Yes, I suppose I am." "Like really rich? Like private jet and mansions rich?" "Yes." Isabella considered this for a moment. "Cool. Does that mean I'm rich too now?" "Isabella Sofia Martinez," Sofia said, using her daughter's full name in the tone that meant business. Money doesn't work that way. Actually, Alexander said carefully, in a legal sense, Bella is my heir. But more importantly, she's my daughter, which means she's the most valuable thing in my world, regardless of money. Isabella smiled at that, the first truly warm expression she'd directed at Alexander. That's a good answer. You get points for that one. I'm glad I passed the test, Alexander said, grinning back at her. They spent the next hour talking, Alexander answering Isabella's rapid-fire questions about his company, his inventions, and his life. But the questions that mattered most came near the end of their meal. Did you love my mom when you were kids? Isabella asked, her voice suddenly smaller, more vulnerable. Alexander looked at Sofia, seeing the girl he'd fallen in love with 15 years ago still shining through the woman she'd become. I loved your mom more than I thought it was possible to love someone. She was my whole world. And do you still love her now? The question hung in the air between them, loaded with possibility and danger. Alexander had built his fortune on calculated risks, but this felt like the biggest gamble of his life. Yes, he said simply. I never stopped loving her. Isabella turned to her mother with the same piercing directness. Do you still love him, Mom? Sofia's composure finally cracked, tears spilling down her cheeks as she nodded. Yes, Misha. I tried not to, but yes. I never stopped loving him either. Isabella sat back in the booth, a satisfied expression on her young face. Good. Because it would be really weird to have parents who didn't love each other. So what happens now? Alexander and Sofia exchanged glances, both realizing that their precocious daughter had just cut through 15 years of complication with the clarity only a child could possess. Now we figure out how to be a family. Alexander said, If you want that, if you'd like me to be part of your life. Are you kidding? Isabella said, her eyes lighting up. My dad is literally Alexander Chen. Do you know how cool that's going to make me at school? Plus, Mom's been working 2 jobs forever, and she's always tired. Maybe now she can just work 1 job and actually sleep. Sofia laughed through her tears. It's not quite that simple, baby. Why not? Isabella challenged. He's rich, he loves you, you love him, and I'm his daughter. Seems pretty simple to me. That evening, Alexander found himself in Sofia's modest apartment for the first time, sitting on her worn couch while Isabella showed him her room. The space was small, but filled with love, every surface decorated with Isabella's artwork and photos of mother and daughter adventures. She's incredible, Alexander said as Isabella disappeared into her bedroom to get her chess set. You raised an amazing daughter, Sofia. We raised an amazing daughter, Sofia corrected softly. She has your mind, your way of seeing straight to the heart of problems. I just provided the structure and the hugs. Alexander looked around the apartment, taking in the carefully maintained furniture, the bills stacked neatly on the kitchen counter, the photographs that chronicled 12 years of birthdays and school events and quiet moments between mother and daughter. I miss so much, he said quietly. First steps, first words, first days of school. All those moments you can never get back. Sofia sat beside him on the couch, close enough that he could smell the faint scent of her shampoo. You can't change the past, Alexander. But you can be here for everything that comes next. First boyfriend drama, high school graduation, college applications. All the big moments are still ahead of us. I want to be here for all of it, Alexander said. The big moments and the small ones. Piano recitals and parent-teacher conferences and midnight trips to the emergency room when she has the flu. Even the boring stuff? Sofia asked with a small smile. Helping with math homework and driving carpool and listening to her complain about her friends? Especially the boring stuff, Alexander said firmly. I've spent 15 years living in a penthouse that echoes with emptiness. I want noise and chaos and normal family problems. I want to worry about teenage attitudes and college tuition, and whether she's dating boys who are good enough for her. Isabella emerged from her bedroom carrying an ornate chess set, her face bright with excitement. Dad, do you play chess? Mom taught me, but she's not very good. No offense, Mom. None taken, Misha, Sofia said with a laugh. I taught you what I could, but you surpassed me years ago. Alexander studied the chessboard as Isabella set up the pieces. recognizing the strategic mind behind her careful placement. I do play chess, Bella, though I have a feeling you're going to be a much tougher opponent than the business executives I usually play against. Probably, Isabella said with confidence that made both her parents laugh. I'm in the advanced tournament at school. We're going to state championships next month. State championships? Alexander repeated, impressed. That's incredible, Bella. Yeah, but Mom has to work that weekend, so she might not be able to come watch me play, Isabella said, not accusingly, but with the matter-of-fact acceptance of a child used to disappointment. Alexander looked at Sofia, seeing the guilt and frustration in her eyes. How many moments had she missed because of work? Because keeping their small family afloat required constant sacrifice. What if your mom didn't have to work that weekend? Alexander asked carefully. What if she could take time off to watch you play? Isabella's eyes widened with hope. Could she? Really? I don't need charity, Alexander, Sofia said quietly, but without the sharp defensiveness he'd heard before. It's not charity, Alexander said, echoing the conversation they'd had 15 years ago when he'd tried to help her family. It's what families do for each other. They show up for the important moments. Sofia looked at her daughter's hopeful face, then at Alexander's sincere expression, and something inside her shifted. For 12 years, she'd carried the weight of single parenthood with fierce independence, never asking for help, never admitting she needed support. But maybe, just maybe, it was time to let someone else share the load. Okay, she said softly. If you're sure it's not too much trouble. Mom, he owns like half the internet, Isabella said with exaggerated patience. I think he can handle getting you a weekend off work. Alexander laughed, delighted by his daughter's precocious wit. She's got a point there. They played chess until nearly midnight, Alexander marveling at Isabella's strategic thinking and competitive spirit. She beat him twice and fought him to a draw in the third game, her face glowing with pride at holding her own against someone she clearly considered a worthy opponent. I should probably head home, Alexander said reluctantly, as Isabella's yawns became more frequent. School tomorrow. Will you come back? Isabella asked, and the vulnerability in her voice made Alexander's chest tighten. If you want me to, I'll come back every day, he promised. I want you to, Isabella said firmly. We have 12 years to catch up on, and I want to know everything. What you were like as a kid, how you learned to build computers if you ever got in trouble at school. Oh, he definitely got in trouble at school, Sofia said with a grin. Remember when you hacked into the principal's computer to change the lunch menu? Alexander groaned in mock embarrassment. I was trying to get them to serve something other than mystery meat. It was a public service. Isabella's eyes lit up with delight. You were a troublemaker? This keeps getting better. As Alexander prepared to leave, Sofia walked him to the door while Isabella brushed her teeth. They stood in the narrow hallway, suddenly shy with each other despite everything they'd shared. Thank you, Sofia said quietly. For today, for being so good with her, for making this easier than I thought it would be. Thank you for raising such an incredible daughter, Alexander replied. She's everything I could have hoped for and more. Sofia reached up and touched his cheek, the same gentle gesture she'd made 15 years ago when they were just kids figuring out love for the first time. I'm scared, Alexander. This is all happening so fast, and I don't want Isabella to get hurt if things don't work out. Alexander covered her hand with his, holding it against his face. Things are going to work out, Sofia. I'm not the confused teenager who let you slip away 15 years ago. I'm a man who knows what he wants, and what I want is a life with you and Isabella. Whatever it takes, however long it takes, I'm not giving up on us again. Sofia searched his eyes, looking for any trace of doubt or hesitation. Instead, she found the same unwavering determination that had built a billion-dollar empire, now focused entirely on their small family of 3. Okay, she whispered, but we take it slow. Isabella comes first, and we don't make promises we can't keep. Agreed, Alexander said, leaning down to press a soft kiss to her forehead. We have all the time in the world to get this right. As he drove home through the quiet Seattle streets, Alexander felt something he hadn't experienced in 15 years, genuine happiness. Not the hollow satisfaction of another successful deal or the brief pleasure of a new acquisition, but the deep, abiding joy that came from being exactly where he belonged. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. There would be logistics to figure out. lawyers to consult, a world to navigate that had no roadmap for billionaire CEOs suddenly discovering they had 12-year-old daughters. But tonight, for the first time since he was 17 years old, Alexander Chen fell asleep dreaming of the future instead of mourning the past. The news broke on a Tuesday morning, 3 weeks after Alexander had met his daughter. Sofia was making breakfast when Isabella burst into the kitchen, her phone clutched in her trembling hand. "Mom, we're famous," Isabella said, her voice a mixture of excitement and terror. Sofia looked at the screen and felt her world tilt sideways. The headline read, "Tech billionaire Alexander Chen's secret love child revealed." Below it was a photo of the three of them leaving the diner, Alexander's hand protectively on Isabella's shoulder while Sofia walked beside them. How did they find out? Sofia whispered, sinking into a kitchen chair. Isabella scrolled through the article with the digital fluency of her generation. "Someone saw us together and recognized Dad. They hired a private investigator. Mom, they know everything. Where we live, where I go to school, even that you clean his office building." Sofia's phone rang, Alexander's name flashing on the screen. She answered with shaking hands. "Sofia, I'm so sorry." Alexander's voice was tight with fury. "My security team is already tracking down who leaked this. I'm sending bodyguards to your apartment right now." "Bodyguards?" Sofia repeated, looking at Isabella's wide eyes. "Alexander, this is exactly what I was afraid of. We're not equipped for this kind of attention." "You don't have to be equipped for it," Alexander said firmly. "That's what I'm for. I'm coming over right now. Don't leave the apartment until I get there." Within an hour, Sofia's quiet neighborhood was transformed into a media circus. News vans lined the street, reporters shouted questions from the sidewalk, and cameras flashed constantly at their windows. Isabella watched from behind the curtains with fascination rather than fear. "This is actually kind of cool," she said, as a news helicopter circled overhead. "I'm going to be the most popular kid in school." "This isn't a game, Maya," Sofia said, but she couldn't help admiring her daughter's resilience. Isabella had inherited Alexander's ability to stay calm under pressure, along with his strategic thinking. Alexander arrived with a small army of security personnel who efficiently cleared a path through the reporters. He swept into the apartment like a force of nature, immediately pulling both Sofia and Isabella into his arms. "Are you okay?" he asked, scanning their faces for signs of distress. "We're fine," Sofia said, though her voice betrayed her anxiety. "But Alexander, this changes everything. I can't take Isabella to school through that mob. I can't go to work. We're trapped." Alexander's jaw tightened as he looked out at the chaos below. "You're not trapped. You're free. This is your chance to stop hiding, to stop living smaller than you deserve." "What do you mean?" Sofia asked. Alexander took her hands, his eyes blazing with determination. "Move in with me, both of you. Let me protect you. Let me provide for you the way I should have been doing for the past 12 years. Sofia pulled back, shaking her head. "Alexander, we can't just move into your penthouse. That's not who we are." "Why not?" Isabella interjected, looking up from her phone where she'd been reading the flood of comments and news coverage. "Mom, look at this. They're calling us gold diggers and opportunists. They're saying you trapped a rich man with a baby. At least if we move in with Dad, we can control the narrative." Alexander looked at his daughter with pride and amazement. "When did you become a public relations expert?" "About 5 minutes ago when I realized my life was about to become a reality show," Isabella said with a maturity that broke Sofia's heart. "Mom, we can't go back to the way things were. Everyone knows about us now. We might as well be together." Sofia felt the walls of her carefully constructed life crumbling around her. For 12 years, she'd maintained control through independence, through keeping their world small and manageable. But Isabella was right. There was no going back. "What about my job at the community center?" Sofia asked. "Those kids depend on me." "You can still work there," Alexander said. "In fact, I want to expand your program, turn it into something that can help thousands of kids instead of dozens. You have the vision and the passion. I have the resources. We can build something incredible together." Sofia looked around her small apartment, at the life she'd built through sheer determination and sacrifice. It wasn't much by Alexander's standards, but it was hers. Giving it up felt like losing herself. "I need time to think," she said finally. Alexander nodded, understanding the magnitude of what he was asking. "Take all the time you need. But Sofia, you're not just Isabella's mother anymore. You're the mother of my child, which makes you family, and I protect my family." The decision was made for them 2 days later when a reporter followed Isabella to school and cornered her in the parking lot, shoving a microphone in her face and asking invasive questions about her parents' relationship. Isabella handled it with poise, giving calm, diplomatic answers that would have impressed a seasoned politician. But the incident terrified Sofia and infuriated Alexander. "That's it," Alexander said when he saw the footage on the evening news. "You're moving in tonight. I don't care if you sleep in the guest room and pretend I don't exist, but I'm not letting strangers harass my daughter." Sofia looked at Isabella, who was actually reviewing her television debut with a critical eye. "I think I came across well," Isabella said thoughtfully. "Poised but not arrogant. Confident but still age-appropriate." "Mija, you shouldn't have to think about things like that," Sofia said, pulling her daughter close. "You should be worried about homework and friends and whether boys like you, not how you appear on camera." "But this is our reality now, Mom," Isabella said with wisdom beyond her years. "We can either hide from it or figure out how to use it to help people. Dad's foundation could do amazing things with this kind of publicity." Alexander stared at his daughter in wonder. "How are you 12 years old? You think like a CEO." "I think like your daughter," Isabella corrected with a grin that was pure Sofia. "And Mom's daughter. You taught me to be strategic, she taught me to care about people. Together you made someone pretty awesome." That night, Sofia packed their belongings while Alexander's security team swept the apartment for listening devices and cameras. The invasion of their privacy was complete, but somehow, surrounded by Alexander's people who treated them with respect and protectiveness, Sofia felt safer than she had in years. The penthouse was exactly what Sofia had expected. Stunning, expensive, and completely impersonal. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered breathtaking views of Elliott Bay, while minimalist furniture spoke of money rather than comfort. "It's beautiful," Sofia said politely, though she felt like a tourist in a museum. "It's empty," Alexander said bluntly. "I bought it because it was the most expensive property available, not because it felt like home. But maybe now it can become something different." Isabella was less diplomatic in her assessment. "Dad, this place is like a fancy hotel. Where are the family photos? The books? The stuff that shows who you are?" Alexander looked around his pristine living space and saw it through his daughter's eyes. "I guess I never collected stuff. I was too busy building the company to think about building a life." "Well, that changes now," Isabella declared, already exploring the space with the confidence of someone who belonged everywhere. "We're going to need to redecorate. Make it feel like a real family lives here." Over the following weeks, Sofia watched her daughter bloom in ways she'd never expected. Isabella thrived on the intellectual stimulation of long conversations with Alexander about technology, philosophy, and business. She devoured books from his extensive library and asked pointed questions about everything from coding to corporate responsibility. "She's going to run a Fortune 500 company someday," Alexander said one evening as they watched Isabella give a presentation to his board of directors about youth engagement strategies for the foundation. "She's 12, Sofia reminded him, though pride swelled in her chest as Isabella fielded questions from executives with decades of experience. "I was writing code at 12, Alexander said, "but I was hiding in my room doing it. She's already more socially sophisticated than I'll ever be. She gets that from you." Sofia had to admit that seeing Isabella in this environment revealed aspects of her daughter's personality that had been hidden by their constrained circumstances. The girl who had been content with library books and community center activities was actually hungry for intellectual challenge and meaningful work, but it was the small moments that transformed the sterile penthouse into something approaching a home. Isabella claimed the piano in the corner that Alexander had never learned to play, filling the space with music during her practice sessions. Sofia's books appeared on previously empty shelves, and soon the refrigerator was covered with Isabella's artwork and school photos. "It's starting to look like people actually live here," Alexander observed one Saturday morning as he made pancakes while Sofia and Isabella sat at the kitchen island reading different sections of the newspaper. "Good people," Sofia said softly, looking around at the small signs of their presence that had made the space warmer and more welcoming. But their happiness was threatened by forces beyond their control. Alexander's mother, Victoria Chen, had been conspicuously absent since the news broke. That changed on a rainy Thursday evening when she appeared at the penthouse door, elegant and intimidating in a way that made Sofia feel 17 again. "Alexander," Victoria said, sweeping into the apartment without waiting for an invitation. "We need to talk." Isabella looked up from her homework, instantly alert to the tension in the room. "Are you my grandmother?" she asked with typical directness. Victoria's composure wavered slightly as she looked at her granddaughter for the first time. Isabella's resemblance to Alexander at that age was unmistakable, but there was something in her bearing that spoke of Sofia's strength as well. "I suppose I am," Victoria said carefully. "Cool," Isabella said, returning to her homework. "I always wondered what it would be like to have grandparents. Mom's grandparents died before I was born." The casual acceptance in Isabella's voice seemed to disarm Victoria more than any confrontation could have. Sofia watched the older woman struggle with emotions she clearly hadn't expected to feel. "Alexander, could we speak privately?" Victoria requested. "Anything you have to say, you can say in front of Sofia and Isabella," Alexander replied firmly. "They're my family." Victoria's eyes flashed with something between hurt and anger. "And what am I? What is the family that raised you, that built the foundation for everything you've achieved?" "You're my mother," Alexander said simply. "And I love you, but you don't get to dictate who else I love or how I build my life." Victoria looked around the transformed penthouse, taking in the family photos Sofia had hung, the casual clutter of actual living, the evidence of three people building a life together. "This woman," Victoria began, her voice icy as she gestured toward Sofia. "This woman has a name," Alexander interrupted. "And she's the mother of your granddaughter. She's also the woman I'm going to marry, if she'll have me." The words hung in the air like a thunderclap. Sofia's head snapped up from the magazine she'd been pretending to read, her eyes wide with shock. Isabella dropped her pencil, staring at her father with undisguised delight. "Alexander," Sofia whispered, "we haven't talked about—" "I know we haven't talked about it," Alexander said, turning to face her fully. "I was waiting for the right moment, for things to settle, for us to find our rhythm as a family. But I'm tired of waiting for the perfect moment. I've already lost 15 years with you. I don't want to lose another day." He dropped to one knee right there in the living room, pulling out a ring box that Sofia suspected he'd been carrying for weeks. "Sofia Martinez, you were my first love, the mother of my child, and the missing piece of my soul. Will you marry me?" Victoria gasped in outrage, but Isabella whooped with joy, abandoning her homework to witness this moment that would define their family's future. Sofia looked at the man kneeling before her, then at their daughter whose face was bright with hope, then at Victoria whose disapproval radiated across the room like a cold wind. This wasn't the romantic proposal she might have dreamed of as a teenager, but it was real and honest, and absolutely perfect for the complicated, beautiful life they were building together. "Yes," she said, tears streaming down her face. "Yes, Alexander, I'll marry you." As Alexander slipped the ring onto her finger and pulled her into his arms, Isabella launched herself at both of them in a family hug that knocked them all slightly off balance. Even Victoria seemed affected by the raw emotion in the room, her stern expression softening despite her obvious reservations. "Well," Victoria said finally, "I suppose if this is happening, we'll need to plan a wedding. The Chen family has a reputation to maintain." Alexander looked over Sofia's head at his mother, recognizing the grudging acceptance in her voice. "The only reputation I care about maintaining is being a good husband and father." Victoria nodded stiffly, but Sofia caught the way the older woman's eyes lingered on Isabella with something that might have been the beginning of grandmother's love. That night, after Isabella had gone to bed still buzzing with excitement about the engagement, Sofia and Alexander stood on the balcony looking out over the city lights. Sofia twisted the ring on her finger, still overwhelmed by how quickly their lives had changed. "Are you sure about this?" she asked. "Marriage, instant family, All the complications that come with it? Alexander pulled her closer, breathing in the scent of her hair. Sofia, I built a $12 billion company from nothing but an idea and determination. But the most important thing I've ever created was the love I felt for you when we were 17. Everything else was just killing time until I could find my way back to you. Sofia leaned against his chest, feeling his heartbeat steady and strong beneath her cheek. Below them, Seattle sparkled with infinite possibility. 8 million people living their own stories of love and loss and second chances. What happens now? She asked. Now we stop looking backward, Alexander said, his voice full of quiet conviction. Now we build something beautiful together. You, me, and Isabella. A real family, a real home, a real life. And this time, no matter what obstacles we face, I'm never letting you go. As they stood together in the darkness, the city spreading out below them like a constellation of dreams, Sofia felt something she hadn't experienced since she was 17 years old. Absolute certainty that she was exactly where she belonged. The girl who had once loved a brilliant boy with impossible dreams had grown into a woman strong enough to stand beside the man he'd become. And their daughter, wise beyond her years and fearless in the face of any challenge, would be the bridge between their past and their future. The love letters Alexander had written 15 years ago had finally found their way to the right address. Not through the mail, not through desperate searches or chance encounters, but through the patient work of two people who had never stopped believing in the power of love to rewrite any story, no matter how many years had passed or how many obstacles stood in the way. Their fairy tale was just beginning, and this time, they were writing it together. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.